We've sort of covered him from a distance. We had his dad in last year, long time, renowned coach in Melbourne. And my next guest has come off his most productive year on the tour, where he played a big volume of matches, 103 matches to be exact. And most of them on a hard court through qualifying, main draw matches combined, reached his maiden singles final on the ITF Tour, went on to make another final in the same year, 9 quarterfinals, 3 semi-finals. Ranking went from the 1500s down to inside 600. Started his year on the Australian Pro Tour, playing in Bendigo, Canberra. From about mid-April, he took off all the way through to the end of the year, to Tunisia, to Greece, to Germany, Switzerland, France, Austria, Slovakia, and end of the year in New Zealand. I speak of Matthew Dellavedova, who's on his own tennis journey like so many of the Aussies trekking the globe. Hey, it's great to have you in because being home, Matt, wasn't something that occurred too regularly last year.
No, thank you for having me. No, it wasn't. It was I did 9.5 months straight last year, so it was a big year actually. I think I only missed about out of that 9.5 months, maybe 3 tournaments. Yep.
So we were chatting to Kim Birrell in the first hour, and tennis is all about just trying to make those little inroads. And she's 24, you're 22, and I find when we're trying to critique all the Aussies, we're probably a little impatient. We want the Aussies to rise, but everyone goes on their own journey, and some are producing their best results late 20s, early 30s, and you're only in competition against yourself. So did you feel like last year you ticked some significant boxes for you? Because this has not been an easy path to go out on the ITF Tour and roll your sleeves up. No,
it was very tough. I mean, the year before last, I had a similar year, actually. I put myself in the same position. I think I played about 9 months straight, and I think for the entirety of the year, picked up 2 points and was just struggling in qualies, could rarely win a match in main draw. And I remember coming home and was like, man, what's going on? This is not right. I'm putting in that much work, playing so many matches, and this just isn't coming. So leading into last year, I just wanted to take the mentality of seeing how good I could get. I was actually in a pretty dark place, honestly. I was thinking, man, this isn't going to happen for me.
Yeah.
Which is a sad thing to feel, considering how much work has gone into my tennis. But I remember just saying, look, I'm going to go overseas because I can't live with my ranking being 1,000. I think it was 1,100 my highest ranking was. And I was sitting at about 1,500. And I went, look, I'll go overseas and I just want to see how good I can get. I've got nothing really to defend. Let's just see how far I can go. And I think the biggest hurdle was getting out of qualies. That's the toughest thing. Being in qualies every week, you're playing 3 matches, doesn't really mean anything. They're tough matches. And then once I think I made 3 quarters in Greece. Maybe early on in the year, I made a quarter of a 25. And once I got inside top 1,000 and I started to play, main draw every week, that was the biggest difference for me.
So did the belief then start to really materialise? Because, and I'm not sure, take us aside, you on the road as well, because you're playing at tournaments, Matt, where there are a contingent of Aussies, but do you have anyone who is with you specifically on the road, whether it be a good mate or people who are, family? I know your dad will, try and get overseas when he can.
Well, predominantly the last 2 years, no. Before that, I always had either my dad, who was rarely there, maybe 6 weeks out of 7 months. But I had Drew, who I've known for a very long time, and he was always with me traveling. But the last 2 years, no, essentially not. I was alone. And you try and meet up with guys that you know, and I spend so much time on tour. I know the guys that I get along with and the guys that are good to train with, and you kind of link up with them and shoot them a message and get their schedule, and then at least there's good training if you don't have a good week. And it's just in Tunisia this year there was actually a fair few Aussies, which was cool. I think there was like a group of 10 of us, I think. So that was really cool to have that, and just at night and just to kind of disconnect. And it's nice to hear the Australian accent when you spent so long overseas.
Hey, can I give you a task? If you go back there this year, can you tell them, can they set some cameras up and actually stream Tunisia? Because there are tournaments. I mean, you played there. I didn't break down the exact amount of weeks, but you spent a lot of weeks there, and it is that resort style, isn't it, where you can sort of bunk in for a while, your accommodation there, your food there, you're either going through qualies or direct into main draw, but none of the matches are streamed.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, they really should, because they make so much money there.
Yeah.
And, there is resort setups that do stream them. Like Greece has fantastic.
Yeah.
I met a girl there who worked for a company who did a fantastic job streaming the matches. My dad was able to watch my matches just on a big screen. It was fantastic from back in Australia. So they really should. But again, there was a lot of guys messaging me being like, "Man, you live in Tunisia. Why aren't you leaving?" And I go, "Well, you can budget there. It's really convenient. You have all your food, you have your training, the courts, the tournaments. You don't need to leave." So if I'm traveling around individual countries around Europe, there's a lot of non-expendables. It's harder to budget. You're probably spending more money, and you're changing every week. So I figured with where my ranking was at, I just wanted to stick at a resort, and I started to perform there too. And once I think I made a semi and then a final, and I went, look, it would be silly for me to move on from here. Just stick here. I find it easy. I'm on the road anyway. I'm playing. I'm around competition anyway if I change tournaments. So, I got used to the heat. It's unbelievably hot there, but I think I did most of my leeway in Tunisia this year, and I definitely would do it again if I was in the same position I was starting last year.
Matt, you talked about, just being in a bit of a dark place. Look, Sam Groth used to co-host this show, and I found out about Grothy's whole journey, playing at those 15K, 10K back in his day, ITF. At one stage, he was 500-600, just thinking, I'm going nowhere here. And then it sort of just took off, and you win a couple of matches, the confidence builds. And you come from a tennis family where it was ingrained in you pretty young. Have you ever felt the expectation to perform and have a career, or is it sometimes just your own internal pressure that you actually put on yourself?
I think there's a certain amount of expectation because you realise a family sacrifice, you realise how much effort you've actually put in, and you kind of go, wow, once you get to a point where you've put so much effort in, and not just for myself, especially for my dad and the team that I had around me at a young age, you kind of go, we're working this hard not just to be okay, you're working to be some of the best in the world because you are literally dedicating your life to the sport. There was nothing that I prioritize over my tennis. Still to this day, there's nothing. So, yeah, as I said, when I was in that dark place, I just felt like this is, either I've chosen the wrong sport or this just isn't going to happen for me. And look, there's still thoughts like that now. I'm well aware that I've got a long journey to go to achieve what I want. But yeah, I think a lot of tennis players fit into that category as well, where it is so tough and the depth is so strong, and you get so little reward for that. The level of tennis is so high at the later levels of futures, especially if you're playing in order to win or make finals of futures, you've got to be beating guys like 250, and some of that sometimes you're playing them second round, and you're really essentially getting nothing for that. So it's very difficult to break through, and I think you're also well aware that your family, you're the opposite of financially sufficient. So, you're not making any money. You're well aware that I know that my dad and mum have to be working just to keep me funding. So that's also a pressure that I think a lot of tennis players are aware of.
So this is why we, as a tennis content provider, love following the whole journey. We love following the Aussies who are starting at base camp, if you like, and trying to rise, because it is a fascinating sport to see how people can dig themselves out of adversity, really grind, roll the sleeves up, going to places, far-flung places around the world where a tennis court actually pops up. So I think our listeners understand the challenges. But what do you love, Matt, about the sport? What keeps you grinding and believing that one day I might be able to reach a higher echelon?
I think I'm just obsessed with the sport, honestly. I think I truly just love the sport. There's aspects of it that need to change and would make it easier just to live and probably enjoy other things in life. But, honestly, I often kind of think to myself, if it was my last day on earth, when things get bad and you're like, oh, well, is it worth it? If it was my last day on earth, I'd probably spend most of that day playing tennis. So, I can kind of take myself out of the present and go, well, look, it's not that bad. I've found something in life that I'm very passionate about. It just happens to be an unbelievably tough career. But I think that's what it boils down to, because it's not like, oh, the money at the top's so high. If you were doing it for money, I would have quit a long time ago.
Yep.
So it's not about that. I do love the sport. That's the reality of it. And I think I love competing. And yeah, the lows are incredibly low, but the highs you get from winning a tough match, even though essentially on a big enough scale, no one really cares about it. We know how big that win is and how high the level is. So it feels great. Being out there making, beating good players and getting reward in a tough sport.
So you talked about, if things were a little different. I mean, I was talking to Ali Osborne last week, who sits on the ITF Player Council, who has a voice and a say that's been created in the last couple of years. So how would you, because we talk about this all the time, about the tiers of tennis, how many players, should be actually making a living out of tennis. And we always tend to compare tennis and golf. But where do you think it all sits, Matt? And what's realistic in this big, vast tennis world of how many people actually should be doing okay out of the sport?
Well, I think really, I mean, I don't know the exact number and the correlation between different sports, but I think anywhere really, if you're inside our top 800 in the world at a global sport, I think different polls say tennis is like the third or fifth most popular sport in the world with like 1 billion fans. You should be doing okay. I think you should at least make a living. You should be able to cover costs. And I think something that players often bring up is because tennis isn't on contract, you've got to perform in order to live. So it's not like if you're getting drafted into the NFL, you can train, you can work, and you've got a goal. And if you get drafted, bang, not essentially made it, but you've got a goal to work for, and you're going to be making money no matter what. Whereas tennis, it's kind of like, even if you have an unreal year, you go from like 500 to 200 or 150.
Yep.
That last tournament, you could, do an ankle, and then you got to figure out, okay, well, am I taking a protected or not? And I think that's difficult as well. You've got to perform in order to make a living. So I'd say, honestly, yeah, anywhere in between 800 in the world, I think you should be able to cover costs at least. Not so expensive, or either the tournaments to offer a different, I think I made a final, a first round, a quarter, and a semi, and I was still down like $2,000 at the end of that month. That's just ridiculous. That should not happen whatsoever. So I think, there definitely should be better money distribution.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic of discussion. And I mean, tennis is so unique in a sense with the governance structure, isn't it? Because we don't have an overarching sort of commission who run the game. We have the 4 Grand Slams, the ITF, the ATP and the WTA, somehow trying to get on the same page and collaborate in the better interests of the sport. But it seems a little slow moving in that regard.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And we also talk about as well, if you put more money into the sport and more fans watching and putting them in places where people are going to watch, people will be impressed with the level. The level is unbelievably high. It's just the fact that where these tournaments are put, we make no money. No one actually cares because it's not actually advertised. Like, if anyone knew the level of the players at futures level and the later stages of futures level, there'd be no complaints whatsoever that guy there, no, that's why that guy makes the money, because look what he's doing. He's unbelievable. Like, that's a reality for all futures players and above.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot. I was watching Bernie yesterday. The crowd was bigger the week before, the Challenger and 60K, but even for a 25K, if you've got a couple of grandstands either side, I mean, surely that should be publicised. I'm sure, I mean, I've been to Burnie. I know they have a clubhouse there and they have a few lunches and people do get along, but you'd love to see some atmosphere actually courtside for a 25K.
Absolutely. I think the best tournament I was out with for a future was America by far. They had, on-court interviews, they had kind of like a food stand running, and it was a Marty Fish future actually, and it was done fantastically and everyone enjoyed it. The players thought it was awesome. And, the public loved the entire event, and it was packed every day.
Yep.
As I said, the level is high. If you put them in places where people can get to and you advertise it right, people will come. The level is high.
Matthew Dellavedova is my special guest who's on his tennis journey. The year, Matt, about to resume because back end of last year, you played your final event in New Zealand. You might want to take us through what happened at the back of that and what's sort of delayed the start to this year.
Yeah, well, so I was overseas and I had to make the decision whether or not I wanted to come back. And a big reason for me coming back was I was hoping to get into the AO and I wanted to lead in with a couple tournaments in Australia and especially the New Zealand tournament being, look, if I felt like I needed some matches, I could play it. And I did. I took the flight there, and I had a buddy up there, Corbin, who was kind enough. His family offered me accommodation, so it made sense me going there. And second round, I actually got COVID, which was tough. So obviously had to pull out of that one, and then a kind of a string of health issues happened from there with me. I think I was diagnosed with a kind of like a cyst buildup of mass behind my left eye.
Right.
So yeah, that needed to be surgically removed basically as soon as possible. But before that, the symptoms weren't too bad. And I was really hoping to get into the AO. That was my plan. Even at the start of last year, I went, look, if I can get my ranking good enough and move enough places, it would be nice for me to get a wild card. And look, it was everyone there was obviously deserving of the wild card, but I was definitely disappointed that I missed out. I felt like that I'd had a pretty good year, and I'd moved about 1,000 places. I remember saying to my dad, if I could have gotten to the fours, I probably would have secured it, maybe. But look, I actually missed out on Canberra, so I had to pull out of New Zealand. I missed out on getting into Canberra, and then, I missed out on the wild card into AO. So it's been a tough start to the year, actually.
What's the communication like, Matt? Because we wrote a piece on our website post the AO about wildcards. We've done 2 pieces on our website the last 2 years. We've spoken to a handful of players, and some say the communication isn't great, and they want a bit more transparency around how wildcards are picked. Now, I fully understand this is a bit of a delicate topic, so not trying to lead you into anything here, but where do you sort of sit on that and just the communication?
Yeah, look, I actually didn't even know if I was playing or not, I think a few days before the qualies would start. So they were making a very late decision on the wild cards. And as I said, everyone who got a wild card is deserving. They're unreal. But I did think that, maybe with some of them, I probably, I played 103 matches. I was pretty match tough, and I'd had a good year, and I was confident. And, I feel like I paid my dues. I spent a lot of money overseas, and I think maybe the fact that I chose to play the futures over in Tunisia instead of coming back from the challenges might have had a little bit of an issue on the decision making. But again, flights were like $4,000 coming back. So that's a very tough decision for me to make.
So who do you have dialogue with at TA during the year? Do you have any conversations when you're on the road for that amount of time?
Not a huge amount, no. I mostly led into the conversations before AO. I was speaking to Killer and a little bit of Bernie, but not a huge amount of communication. I just felt like, I was going to be recognised enough through what I was doing, and I'd made a big jump from 1,500 to 570. I think I got to. So I think there could be a little better communication, and at least for them to tell me, look, I think you should come back at all, but that wasn't said to me. And then I could kind of justify, well, this doesn't work for me to come back at this stage.
Okay. We are following up, TA, from our discussion on this last week. We have invited Paul Kildare to come on the show and just explain the wildcard process a little clearer. So you're going to get things underway. We've got Swan Hill the next 2 weeks, Canberra. Just tell us your plan for this year.
Yeah, I'll go the 2 Swan Hill, and then I'll play the 2 Canberra. So that gives me 4 25s before heading off overseas. I definitely want to play more 25s this year. I did the 15K grind last year.
Yep.
So I needed to do that to get the ranking to where it is now. And I think starting off with 4 25s is a good option. And then depending on how I go with them, either, head off overseas to maybe a 15 or so, but just try and sneak into a couple challies as well, if I can, depending on the draw sizes and whatnot.
Have you set a mark for this year of where you'd like to try and be thereabouts?
I've been doing it from last year. I've just been going hundreds. That's what I did the entire year. So I've literally just gone with 500, I want to get into the 400s. And what's the minimum amount of points I need in order to get into that 100 spot. So I'm just going to go hundreds again. So next step, 4s.
One off the text here, Matt. What an astute and well-spoken young man. Congratulations on a great couple of years onward and upwards. So a nice compliment there. I think you've come across and given our listeners a real insight into how tough it is at that lower level. Before I let you go, we were just talking about breakpoint during the break. And I think everyone in tennis has probably consumed the first 5 episodes, more to come this year. But I agree with you, and I said this to a few people, a better doco would be that lower level of tennis.
100%.
There'd be some great revealing stuff in there.
Oh, it'd be so much better. I mean, it would truly be insightful because not only just from how tough it is on the players, but I don't want to come across wrong, but some of the corruption that happens as well at these lower level futures and resorts. The reality of how high the level is, how little the money is, how devastated people are after, the conversations people are having with their parents when they're trying to figure out if they can send another K for a week accommodation, the people that have to stay off site because they can't afford it and therefore they're not allowed or they're not granted court access, or they have to pay for courts because they don't have the money to stay at the hotel. It would be much more insightful and I think more interesting. And it's a little bit like the iceberg analogy. I think everybody sees tennis and thinks of it, the top 100, and it's glorious and it's amazing. You make all this money and who wouldn't want to be a tennis player? When in reality, most of the tour is pretty tough and pretty grim. So I think that would be a better representation of how tennis really is.
Hey, well spoken. And I can only wish you all the best. We follow you from a distance. You engaged with us on social media last year, which was great. And we look forward to tuning in and watching lots of your matches being streamed in 2023, Matt. And I just wish you nothing but the best to try and keep going on this upward trajectory. You've invested a lot of sacrifice and just keep chipping away, mate. I'm sure the results will come.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.